What should my startup's financial plan look like? Um, my favorite way to create a financial plan for a startup is to have three columns. In every startup, and I don't care if this is a nonprofit or a for-profit, I don't care if this is a small side gig or a company that you're going to take public one day. You want to start with a plan, and it's going to have three phases. And phase one is going to be the startup phase. And you may or may not require starting capital, but it's going to be startup. You might have some customers or some clients or some patients. You might not. Hey, Chantal, welcome to the show. So glad you're here. I'm answering the question, what should my startup's financial plan look like? So phase one, always the startup phase. And you're going to have certain costs in the startup phase. You may or may not have revenues. And even if you do have revenues, they could be different from what your company does ultimately. You might, for example, take on a couple of startup gigs just to get just to grease the wheels, something you know how to do, even though it's ultimately not going to be what you build for your empire. Or maybe it is. Maybe you're going to start off with that, selling that product or service from the start. So you're going to have a startup phase. And in that phase, you're going to have income, maybe, expenses, definitely, and then whatever that nets to. Welcome, Renee. It's great to see you here. So whatever that nets to in the startup phase, if that number is negative, in other words, if your expenses in the startup phase exceed your anticipated income, then that is a starting capital that you're going to need in order to launch your nonprofit, or it's a startup capital that you're going to need in order to launch your for-profit business. Then you have phase two, which is more like, let's call it initial operations. Some revenue, some expenses, and whatever your net is needs to be financially workable, especially when taken in cumulatively with any losses that may have been incurred in the startup phase. So again, cumulatively, that tells you what your startup capital needs to be. And the third phase is something that I would call ongoing operations, but this is all inside the early stages of forming the business. So this is what it takes to get to ongoing operations. And I suggest a third column with income, expense, and profit at the bottom. And in ongoing operations, by this point, you've established a rhythm. You're not as big, the company isn't as big as it may be in the future, 6 months, a year, 10 years from now. But you now have some momentum, you have established patterns. This is like my shoulders doing this is like the old-time train. Like this is what I'm doing with my arms. So you have momentum, you have established sales processes, you have established administrative processes, established processes for how your organization provides products and or services to the marketplace. And it's established and there's momentum. Whatever revenue level that is. Whatever expense level that is, and that's part of what you get to design. But a financial plan for a startup should always have those three phases because the relationship of income to expenses differs significantly in those three phases, as does the scale of what you're doing, and as does the predictability of what you're doing. And as a quick side note, what I typically do is I create those three phases and I have every number in those cells in the spreadsheet reference a database that's much more detailed and has all the details of, okay, where's our revenue going to come from? And we're going to sell 20 of these at $100 each, and we're going to sell, or 5 hours of services at X dollars per hour, or 10 engagements at $5,000 per engagement, or whatever it is. And you more specifically plan out what those revenues are and expenses are, and then your formulas and your three-phase plan reference that database.